and welcome back. Hi, Jacqueline.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome to Umbraco Community Day. It's fantastic to have you both here with us. And the stage is all yours whenever you want to start your talk. But we here at Umbraco love accessibility. It's one of our favorite topics. So we are all excited to hear from you today. So over to you.
Thank you so much. All right. So, John, you want to take it away?
All right, let me unmute myself. There we go. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is John Wade, and I'm a program manager at Microsoft. I'm a white male in my mid-30s with short brown hair.
And my name is Jacqueline Gibson. I'm a software engineer. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a Black woman in my early 20s with short black locks currently pulled back off my face. John and I are part of the Accessibility and Web Insights team at Microsoft. And today we're going to be talking about the Accessibility Insights product specifically. So if you're not familiar with Accessibility Insights, we offer free and open source tools that help empower teams to find and fix accessibility issues in their web, Windows, and Android applications. Both of us are really happy to be here to talk more about accessibility with you. So one of the things our teams continues to evangelize is the importance of shifting left and including accessibility testing early in the design and development process. And I'm sure many of you have received this message from presenters before at this conference, at other conferences, but we'd be remiss not to emphasize that it's important to catch accessibility issues early and often through testing. And that's the best way that you can ensure that your products are inclusively and accessibly designed.
That said, we know that getting other folks on your team excited about accessibility can sometimes be challenging. We have found the same approach doesn't work for everyone, and it's often not enough to tell others that it's simply the right thing to do. A lot of teams are encouraged to fix accessibility issues for compliance and legal reasons, but many developers have shared with us they don't know where to begin.
And it can be even more stressful if the first time that you're considering accessibility is at the end of the product development. Because let's be honest, trying to fix bugs and ship on time, it doesn't create a really great environment for learning and retaining accessibility information. And often it can result in quote unquote fixes that are barely usable and don't create equitable experiences for users of all abilities. And so we hear from teams from time to time that they're worried about accessibility work adding time to their development process. And they generally don't know when and how to prioritize accessibility. But something that we like to share with them is that it's better to build accessibility into your development process than to wait and address it late when your team is already feeling rushed.
That's exactly right. One of the strategies we have found helpful on our team is building accessibility passes into all of our pull requests and product releases. While it initially seems like it would take more time to add these steps up front, we found that it improves our validation process. We catch most accessibility issues before they're merged into the main code base, and others are caught and addressed before we release to the public. The benefits of doing it right the first time are worth any of the concerns about additional testing time. You may be able to recruit other accessibility advocates throughout the company just because it is the right thing to do. The more people you have thinking about accessibility, the more likely issues will be caught before they are problems.
Okay, so John, I think we've talked quite a bit about why teams should shift left and consider accessibility early and often. But how about we switch gears and do the fun thing, which is jump into a demo and show some examples of how accessibility insights can help.
Awesome. I love examples. I think our web extension is a great starting point. Jacqueline, would you mind sharing your screen?
I do not. Give me 1 second and try to pull that up.
Cool. All right, so once that shows up, we will see a website of a fictional college called Accessible University. This is the school's homepage, and it has a carousel with images, some submenus, a form to apply, and some text at the bottom. I'd also like to take a moment to call out the site was created by the University of Washington for accessibility testing purposes, and definitely recommend you all take a look if you get a chance.
All right, so John, if this is your first time interacting with the site, would you feel comfortable coming out the gate and saying, it's accessible?
Well, at first glance, it's hard to say. For software to be accessible, it needs to be usable for people of all backgrounds and abilities. And it's our job as a development team to verify this is true through accessibility testing. Developing for all users is where it gets tricky for a lot of developers, because unfortunately, some teams don't give accessibility the priority it deserves.
You're right. Sometimes people think of accessibility as something that's not important because it, quote, only inconveniences some people. But I think both you and I know, John, that this is a horrible way to approach design because it's never okay to exclude a portion of your users, however small you think that portion might be. And in reality, the portion of users who benefit from accessible designs is 100%. Every single one of us at this conference, every single person we know, will need accommodations or accessibility features at one point in their life. Be it for a permanent, temporary, or situational change in ability, accessibility features will make your life easier. And so a great example of this spectrum in ability is to consider the following three scenarios. So there are users who only have one arm. So that would be a permanent change in ability. Users who have their arm in a sling, temporary change in ability. And users who might have a needy puppy, like me, and sometimes have to hold that dog in one arm while still trying to code, situational. But every single person that I listed, they could use all of the accessibility features and benefit from being able to navigate a website only with a keyboard, for example.
That's right, Jacqueline. The first thing we need to remember is that accessibility needs to be considered in every step of the process. Just like you cannot add sugar to a cake after you've baked it, you cannot just sprinkle accessibility into a product after it's been built. Unfortunately, this site has already been built, so we're already at a disadvantage. Let's pretend we're the development team for this site and we want to know if we need to make any accessibility changes. Jacqueline, what's our first move?
Okay, if I were a dev for this site and I was trying to figure out where we were landing on the inclusive design scale, I would use accessibility insights for web, and I would use it to test accessibility on this page. So full disclosure, accessibility insights for web is our team's browser extension, and it has two main workflows I'm going to pull up now. The first is FastPass, which you can use to identify common accessibility issues in less than 5 minutes. And then we also have assessments where you can get a more detailed analysis of the site's accessibility against the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. You might have heard of that as WCAG. And the automated checks for both of these workflows are powered by AxeCore. Additionally, we have ad hoc tools, which isn't technically a workflow, but it allows you to quickly use different visualizations to test once you're more comfortable with the extension. Okay, so stepping back into dev for Accessibility University mode, I'm going to run FastPass. And while that's loading, I'm going to go ahead and pull this to a side a little bit. All right, so it seems the automated checks has already found some common issues. We have about 17 failures on this page, and I actually don't feel overwhelmed. And you want to know why, John? Because the extension has grouped all the instances by type. It's easy for me to see that there are about 4 categories right here for different failures, and I can open these and I see that it has basically taken all of the code snippets for those specific failures. It's giving me more information about the rule, how to fix it, and it even identifies where in the code the problem is.
Well, I think that's pretty cool, Jacqueline. I mean, I know one thing I have learned working in web accessibility is the importance of color choices, especially for those with different vision needs. Can Accessibility Insights help developers with this?
It sure can. So one of the first issues, and the one that I opened previously, was for the color contrast failure. And so Accessibility Insights for Web clearly explains to me that the problem is that this element has insufficient color contrast, meaning that if someone has any visual disability, it would be even more difficult for them to be able to read the text there. But in addition to giving me information about where I can learn more about this rule, the extension does the heavy lifting for me, and it finds a more compatible color to give me the color contrast ratio that I need to be accessible. And it even gives me, once again, the path to the code so that I can figure out how to fix it more easily.
Trying to remember all the guidelines and requirements can be a bit overwhelming, especially when you're new to the accessibility space. But one of the things our team has prioritized in our tool is making the information easily digestible so any user can learn about accessibility. Just to reiterate, you don't need to be an expert to test your site and fix common accessibility issues. All right, to switch gears, earlier in the presentation, we talked about users who navigate by keyboard. Is there anything you can do to check if our sites are accessible for them?
Yes. So the second step in FastPass is called tab stops, and it has a visualization that shows me how a user using keyboard only, not a mouse, will be able to navigate my page. And just like in automated checks, I have all this awesome documentation available to me on how to test and why it's useful. So I'm going to go ahead and toggle on the visual helper, which will then take me back to the page that we're testing on, which is the Accessibility Insights Accessible University homepage. So I'm going to tab through, And as I do this, it's going to add circles to the page with a number, and it's also going to draw lines in between those circles. And this just helps me understand the order in which every single one of these elements will be reached if I were navigating via key. So that's enough of that. I think I'm going to go ahead and stop here now that I've reached the bottom of the page. And so for the sake of this site, we've been able to notice that a lot of the menus are being hit, but this main carousel in the middle, for example, isn't being hit, which means that if you were using a keyboard, you wouldn't be able to navigate and see these images. That's an accessibility problem.
Yeah, and when you go back to the extension, you can see if any other potential keyboard accessibility issues have been auto-detected. This includes focus indicators and keyboard traps, and the extension gives you guidance on how to test and determine if your site passes or fails. Okay, so the FastPass experience is speedy and helpful to find common accessibility issues, but what can developers use if they want to dive deeper and solve even more accessibility issues?
So this is where we step into our second workflow, which is the assessment. And so assessment is a combination of automated, assisted, and manual checks that basically test your web page against the WCAG 2.1 AA success criteria. And so I'm going to just open one of my favorite tests, which is images and text alternative. And so this is one of our assisted tests, which means that the extension will go ahead and pull potential elements that might have a failure or might not. And then we provide you with guidance on how to test. And then you can go in and investigate and easily mark if something is passing or is failing. And so each page of the assessment workflow, regardless of if it's automated, manual, or assisted, has rich information on why these requirements matter and how to fix the related issues. And we have examples and links to detailed documentation. Usually at the top, it shares why it matters, how you can fix it in general, and then some special cases that you might want to consider. Sometimes we even have snippets from a user perspective and additional videos on how this requirement can affect users that have interacted with sites.
Well, thank you for that quick and informative demo, Jacqueline. I'm actually going to start sharing my screen now. Cool. Let me get that shared. Okay, so what you're going to see here as soon as it populates is another option that enables teams to run automated accessibility tests, but inside Azure pipelines. The tests use Axe Core, which is the same scanning engine we use for accessibility insights for web, the extension that Jacqueline just demoed, and Axe Windows, the scanning engine we use for AI Windows. The repo, which we'll post a link to, has some sample projects for web projects and resources for those building Windows applications. I'll post this link in the chat. If you're using Selenium and Playwright for testing frameworks, you may find this especially useful to find common issues. All right, let me stop sharing. Cool. The thing we want to the thing we want you to take away is that you don't need to be an expert to start considering accessibility when developing software and learning more about accessibility.
Exactly, John. All the information and requirements to go into accessibility testing can be overwhelming. We know this because we work in this space and we have to deal with it all the time. But that's where our tools come in, because we're working hard to present the information to you in a way that's easy to follow and clearly outlining the steps that you need to take to ensure your products are more accessible. Our team's goal is to meet you wherever you are in your accessibility learning journey, empowering you to make more accessible products for every one of your users. So thank you everyone for following along. We hope that this has been a helpful intro to accessibility insights for web, and that what we share with you today will help you in encouraging teams to shift left and consider accessibility early in the development process. And before we finish, we just want to emphasize that Accessibility Insights is open source. So in addition to what you've seen today, we also offer a couple of other tools that you might find useful, specifically Accessibility Insights for Windows and Accessibility Insights for Android applications. And if you're interested in connecting with our team or even making contributions to any of our products, you can find us on GitHub or on our documentation site, which is accessibilityinsights.io. We're also on Twitter. And if you want to connect with us on Twitter, we're at A11Y Insights. We're going to try to drop the links to these in the chat so you can learn more and connect with us. We're always happy to chat more with you and work together on making this world a more accessible place. And if we're able to do that, we're happy to take some questions from the audience. But if not, feel free to connect with us offline.
Wow. Thank you both. Thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you, John. This was a really great insight into the world of accessibility testing. For me, as a as a as a developer, I hate to admit, but we're definitely not testing our end products as much as we'd like to, or maybe sometimes not at all. And really, with a tool like that, there's no excuse, because it seems so straightforward, right? To just get up and running. And so yeah, I think I've got some homework to do now.
Yes, definitely.
I know that the team working on accessibility and improving accessibility of Umbraco have been using a variety of tools, but it's really exciting to me to hear that there's an open source option
Yeah.
available. And, could you maybe talk me through the motivations for why this was created in the first place?
Yeah, so I think that when this product was created a few years ago, our goal was just creating something that made it easier for developers to find and fix accessibility issues, which I know that's the tagline we use for this talk, but it's truly at the heart of why we do what we do. We're trying to help developers not feel so overwhelmed when they have to focus on making their products more accessible. A lot of times this falls under compliance. It seems very nebulous. It seems very overwhelming. And we're doing our part essentially to demystify accessibility and to make it easier. So when your team does decide, hey, maybe we should be testing for accessibility, it doesn't have to be like pulling teeth.
Yeah, because I know for sure from when we've looked at, say, a requirement from a client before, and they need WCAG, whatever, compliance,
Mhm.
and we look at the extensive list of requirements and how we go about testing and proving those. It's exhaustive, right? It's very big. So whatever we can do to automate that takes a lot of burden off us as implementers, at
Yeah.
least, to to be able
Lots
to
of
make products a little bit
acronyms,
better, at least.
lots of docs. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And it seems from the demos you showed there, even if I don't know necessarily exactly what I'm looking for, it will at least highlight the common issues and sort of walk me through what I need to do to resolve that. That's great.
That's exactly right. And
Uh,
just to reemphasize, we're trying to demystify what makes accessibility mystifying. So instead of just like, hey, here are the things that you need to resolve, it's these are the issues that we identified and also paths forward.
Great. You said it's open source, so I'm interested if it's open for contribution as well. Are people able to contribute to this project? And if so, how?
Yes.
Absolutely.
What kind of contributions?
So there are different levels of contributions. I believe that usually, and I'm not sure if we have any currently open, but what we do try to do when we have the opportunity is tag issues that would be great for first-time contributors, for example. And so if you're interested in adding something for Accessibly Insights for Web, Android, or Windows, you can go to the relevant repo and go into our issues section and look for those. Also, anytime someone wants to open an issue or has a feature request, we have the option for you to indicate if you would like to work on it. And then if that happens, we get in contact with you from the development and PM side, and we work with you to figure out what should this look like, what would the contribution need to include, and we often offer support as well in terms of making sure that it's up to the standards that we have for like our testing and release pipelines.
Oh, excellent.
Absolutely
Mhm.
fantastic. I particularly love the tagline about demystifying accessibility to see what makes it mystified.
Yeah, 'cause I mean, it's totally mystifying to me.
Yeah,
Still totally mystifying.
it is
Can
a
you guys
lot to
tell our
take in.
managers you like that? I don't think I just came up with this, so please tell them that
This will
this
be
should
on
really love
YouTube, so they can just watch this back.
It's a lot to take in accessibility, I am pretty sure. So things like this, educating ourselves on accessibility, watching content, reading content as much as we can, and tools like this can really help us get ahead. And this
Yeah.
circles back to the point where we started the conversation from today. As developers, how responsible should we be in building what we build?
Yeah, for sure.
And just to build on that, like the buck stops with the developers, right? Because at the end of the day, they're the ones pushing the code, and they are empowered to run these kinds of tools and provide these kinds of checks and visibility.
Yeah. So we do have one question in the chat
Yes.
here. So it's about the plugin. Does it work on localhost? So can I run this on like a site that's still in development?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we have the opportunity for you to be able to test with that. Also, if you have just like the file URL locally, you can enable it in the extension and run on local files as well. I do that from time to time.
Fantastic. And is it something that could be run, say, as part of a release pipeline, or could we do this in a more automated way and maybe on a schedule, that sort of thing, for live websites, where especially when we're building content managed websites, content's a huge part of accessibility also. And when people can just go in and edit and change that,
Yeah.
and you've maybe had your beautifully crafted and audited content, and it's ticking every accessibility box, someone will come along and ruin it. So is there a way we can do this in a more proactive way to make
Yeah.
sure issues don't arise?
John is lighting up because he has the answer.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's almost like you've been hanging out in our tooling meetings. So we are working on that also. So at Microsoft internal, we have built a scanning engine, basically. So it will initiate scans on a monthly basis using this technology. Since it's all open source, we were just like, great, we're going to take this and we're going to scan every site we know about once a month. And we're going to let the site owners know what the issues are. And that is how we've deployed this at scale internally. I'm sure there's some version of that anybody could use, or if you're not like us and don't have thousands of websites and you only need a couple, you can probably do this manually.
So is that
And
to
then in
say?
terms of being able to
sorry.
run,
No,
no, you go.
Go on, Jack.
We have like a little delay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know.
But in terms of being able to run it in your pipelines, that goes back to the Axe pipeline samples that John was showing, and that's a great way to be able to run automated testing for common accessibility issues. It's not going to be able to get all of them, because I think I would be remiss not to put on my accessibility hat and say that a lot of accessibility testing does require some manual verification, but it is going to be really good for those automated checks that are common and high impact.
Yeah.
Wow, that can be a very powerful tool, isn't it?
I was
Extremely
going to
powerful.
ask, you said there, John, that you're running it on thousands of websites. Is that the case? You're running this across every, or a large part of Microsoft's digital estate to confirm that you're meeting compliance, or is that the goal?
Well, yeah, that's well. So my tool serves the scans, but then it is on the distributed accessibility teams and site owners to take actions against them. But that's the hope, is that we are providing the visibility and the path forward for every site.
But to build off that, just for the person who was asking, we don't currently have that available for external users yet. So we recommend that for like an individual team and an org level, that you work on using accessibility insights for web on like developers individually. You add Axe pipeline samples, and then you can also use some other different things that we have to be able to check for consistently accessible code being checked in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So yeah, I mean, even the chat here, we have Tiffany, who's actually one of the members of the Umbraco community accessibility team, who's sort of echoing what you're saying here and saying, yes, it's an automated tool is not a substitute for for manual testing and manual verification, because
exactly.
It's not a box ticking exercise to say, yeah, our tests are passing. It's more of a tool to assist in the process, right?
Yes, and that's why we have those three categories, because we have the automated ones, but when you step into assessment, we didn't get to go as in-depth as we wanted to, but we have a lot of assisted and manual assessments in there, different test steps that are going to help you understand what you need to do. But at the end of the day, it's up to the individual developer or PM, whoever is running the tool, because I do want to emphasize that this is not a developer-only tool. Anyone can use accessibility insights, but we want to be able to guide you through the steps to be able to verify on your own.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
We have
That's what Tiff's sort of agreeing with again here, that it's part of your arsenal. It's another tool on your belt. It's not necessarily going to capture everything. Some tools will capture give you different insight, or will be more specialized in analyzing certain accessibility issues. So using this as part of a suite is a great idea.
Absolutely. And just to aggressively agree with Tiffany, she's absolutely right. This what we're talking about, or what we showed off today, mostly were the automated checks, and that is just part of your arsenal. This is something that you can run to validate that portion of your accessibility journey, but it is not a it doesn't solve everything. We solve what we can solve.
Tiffany, you must have been at like the talk that John and I did in May 2022, where we were like part of your accessibility toolkit, and we talked about the importance of using tools like this, but also having organizational policies, a team culture that checks for this, that like basically puts this into design, all steps of the development process. So Tiffany, like it's like you're in our minds.
Yeah, the point on culture there is actually really valid, because it's not for one person in an organization to be championing this, and they're probably never going to be able to make the impact that they could unless it's an organizational shift towards we think like accessibility first, or accessibility as a just like security is a concern. We've talked about security today a lot. If security is number one concern, accessibility can be treated in exactly the same way. Lovely.
Exactly.
Thank you both. Thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you, John. This was a really great session and a great chat afterwards also. It's been lovely having you. Just remind people again what the URLs, the Twitter, GitHub, etc. How can we keep in touch with you?
Okay, so if you want more information about the tools and you want to download them, go to accessibilityinsights.io. If you want to connect with us on Twitter, we are at A11Y Insights. I think John put in the link to some of our GitHub repos, but if you don't have those, you can always go to our website or connect with us on Twitter and we can send you all the links. Specifically, you'll probably be interested in our Accessibility Insights for Web repo and Accessibility Insights for Windows. Android is also in the web repo. Whole story, we can tell you about it later. But definitely connect with us. We would love to help your team create more accessible tools for everyone.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Thank you both. It's been great to have you, and we hope to see you at another event very soon.
Yeah, hope to be back. Bye, y'all.
Amazing.
Thanks
you.
all.
Bye-bye. Alrighty, so in a couple of minutes, we're going to welcome our next presenter and one of our final presenters for the day. Can you
Yes.
believe
I know
how far we've come? We are 9+ hours into this now, and yeah, still we've got the energy to keep going, haven't we, Punima?
Yes.
Going to keep going.
Let's do it.
So
do it.
in a short second, we're going to be inviting Carl Zaguna up onto the virtual stage, and he's going to be talking about containers in well, running Docker and Umbraco, and load balancing your Umbraco solution with a Docker container. Also, we must say, coming up, we have one of what's going to be one of my highlights of the day. We have a great talk coming from Mads. He's going to talk about C#11, all the new features there. I think I'm going to geek out a bit, so let's hope he's up for a bit of a chat afterwards, because I think this is going to be kind of fun. But yeah, we'll be back in a short moment with our next speaker.